I can tell you what it is today. Today it's a great reminder of those bygone days of the American Revolution. It is a national shrine. This place, along with the bell across the street, the Liberty Bell, I don't think there's anything else that reminds us more of those Revolutionary War days, those great stories. Now, what was Independence Hall? One time it once served as the Pennsylvania State House, and that was the official title given to it when construction of it ended in 1752. The Liberty Bell was ordered specifically for Independence Hall. The Liberty Bell went into service into the very first tower of Independence Hall in January of 1753. I'm sorry. Anyway, Independence Hall, the Pennsylvania State House, served as the seat of all provincial government. In the 1790s, this complex housed federal government. So that also adds to the rich, unique history of Philadelphia. Now, we all know of that great signing of the Declaration of Independence that occurred way back in August of 1776, not July 4th. That's American mythology. I'll tell you about it when we get over to the hall itself. But the events that led up to that great declaration did not take place right here in Philadelphia. We have to go all the way up to Massachusetts because it was there where the American Revolution really got started in December of 1773. I always like to point to one event. Samuel Adams led 60 of his Mohawk friends onto the king's ships. They were the Sons of Liberty, dressed up as Indians. They went on to the king's ships in Boston Harbor. They threw 342 chests of tea overboard, and they destroyed a lot of tea, and this event was known as the... That's right, the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party really set the ball rolling towards war with England. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after this British property is destroyed, the British, well, they've had enough with these rebels. They decided to pass a series of harsh measures known as the Coercive Acts, or the Intolerable Acts. Now, what do these laws do? Well, they punish the people of Boston until the tea is paid for. They limit colonial assemblies, and basically the Crown is telling everybody in Massachusetts that they are now in a state of nature, which meant a state of war with His Majesty, King George III. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the man who has to implement these coercive acts is a British general. He's a British general. He's the military commander-in-chief of all the colonies, General Thomas Gage. It is this individual who really starts the American Revolution. Now, this is his precarious predicament, ladies and gentlemen. He has to implement the king's authority, and at the same time, he has to avert a shooting war. So he is walking on eggshells, so to speak. And he's becoming very disturbed about what is going on with these coercive acts. He is seeing the negative effects that they are having on the population of Boston. And he's hearing rumors that the militia is starting to gather in strength. They are starting to put together a sizable army, 15,000, 20,000 strong. Gage only has 3,000 British troops in Boston. He could very easily be annihilated with one false move. Now, just down the street here, ladies and gentlemen, once you get done this tour, I would encourage you to visit Carpenter's Hall. At that site in September of 1774, the Continental Congress met to discuss the deteriorating relationship between the Crown and the colonies. Now, this body of men is soon going to have the virtual force of law on their side. So Gage realizes this, and he writes home a very distressing letter to the British Parliament, to the British Secretary, saying, look, you better send to me some 25,000 British troops, backed by the king's ships, more of the king's supplies. Otherwise, we might as well just give up this endeavor of administering to these colonies and stay off our home. British authority here in America is almost dead. The only way we are going to subdue these people is with a strong, solid, standing British army. Well, this letter gets to the British Secretary in London, and the British Secretary, he reads it and he scoffs at Gage's assessment of the situation. He writes a letter back to Gage saying this, look, we're not going to send you 25,000 troops that you're requesting. No such numbers are available. But more importantly, you are going to do that. We're going to send you a few more men, maybe 1,000 more men, a few more supplies that you're requesting. But more importantly, you are going to do this, General Thomas Gage. You are going to force these Americans to the field of battle, and you're going to rout them. You're going to teach them a lesson that they won't soon forget. That way, if they dare even think about opposing the might of the British sword, they will know what is in store for them. Well, this letter, with its ominous implications, gets back to General Thomas Gage. It lands on his desk on April the 14th of 1775. Gage gets up in the morning, he reads the letter, he puts down his egg McMuffin, and then he realizes what is in store. He's reading this letter, he's shaking his head. He's a soldier on the ground who knows what's going to happen if he puts this order into effect. He knows that the shooting war that he has long tried to avoid is going to start. But he obeys the order. He organizes 800 of his best troops to march off to two little towns, Lexington and Concord. They have two objectives. One, they're going to apprehend Samuel Adams and John Hancock. There's two great troublemakers if they can get their hands on them. And secondly, they're going to destroy the colony supply of gunpowder that is rumored to be stored in nearby Concord. The British troops march out. At 8:30 p.m. on April the 18th of 1775, Paul Revere gets his warning, one by land, two by sea. He makes his way across the Massachusetts interior. It is he who arrives in Lexington first, shouting that the regulars are on their way. The Lexington men wake up and they decide what to do. They're going to muster this paltry show of force on Lexington Green, consisting of only 80 Minutemen. And, ladies and gentlemen, as the early morning sun rose on April the 19th of 1775, I'll continue with the story when we get over to the hall itself. Please follow me through this door, through the front door of Independence Hall.
I would never do that such a thing.
No, this kid, no, this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you now to the Pennsylvania State House, Independence Hall. And before I proceed along with the tour, I'd like to tell you how this building got its name. We have to go all the way back to the 1820s. A man who once served as the young aide-de-camp to General George Washington, a hero of the American Revolution. He is returning to Philadelphia. He walks through the front door. The year is 1824. The Marquis de Lafayette goes into the little next door, and he says that it is here in this great hall of independence, where the American dream of a new republic was started. Ladies and gentlemen, that reference made by the Marquis de Lafayette essentially gave this building its name. Now, around the same time, the Liberty Bell got its name also. In 1838, the New York Abolitionist published a pamphlet They used a distinct image of the Liberty Bell. They say the Liberty Bell rings. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land, unto all the inhabitants thereof. Ladies and gentlemen, liberty for all Americans, not just a privileged class. Live up to those words that were crafted in Philadelphia's Independence Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, means that we know very well today, but it's common American usage at around the same time in the early to mid part of the 19th century. Now, the room you're standing in here was once used as the provincial Supreme Court for Pennsylvania. This was the highest court in the land. The magistrates would come in through that door right there. They would walk up here on the bench. They would stare down at the unfortunate soul that had to stand trial in the dock right here. And before the court would proceed, everybody, including the defendant, would bow to a great seal that used to occupy center stage of this room. And they would say, "God save the King." They would bow to the seal, and then the court would proceed. Why did they do this? Because this was an acknowledgement. That gesture was an acknowledgement to His Majesty King George III, the ruling sovereign of the American colonies. Let me tell you what happened to this original seal post. On July the 8th, 1776, read for the very first time out back here at State House Yard was the Declaration of Independence. Colonel John Nixon read that document with such emotion and such enthusiasm that after some men of the Flower Guard burst through the back door of this building, they went up on high. They tore down that King's seal. In the evening, they tossed it, they dragged it through the streets, folks, and in the evening, they tossed it onto a bonfire and they destroyed it. This, in and of itself, was an act of treason. So much so that when the British troops marched from the city of Philadelphia, they held it for a year from 1777 to 1778. They decided to exact a revenge on this building itself by trashing the interior. When they left here, they took away all the original furniture. And why did they do that? Because it was where those rebels had dared to tear down the King's seal. And it was also the site of that treasonous Declaration of Independence. And now we are going to go to the very room where the Declaration of Independence was once signed, right across the hall, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you now to the Declaration Chamber, the similar to Independence Hall. It was right here where over 2 centuries ago, our United States of America was born. Now, pick up with that little story I was telling you over there at the East Wing. Ladies and gentlemen, as the sun began to rise on April the 19th of 1775, there are 800 British regulars bearing down on Lexington Green. The 80-minute men are trembling with fear. An order goes out from the British. Disperse, ye rebels, disperse. No one knows who fires that first shot. To this day, it is a mystery. But the British do fire a full volley into the Massachusetts men. They kill 8 of them. They wound 10 others. They send up a great victory cry, and then they go on down the road to Concord. Ladies and gentlemen, their enthusiasm, their enjoyment, their victory is fleeting because the British know that something terrible is about to befall them. Why? Because they can hear the church bells toll. They are sounding the alarm. There's some 15,000 Minutemen responding to the call. Ladies and gentlemen, the British realize they better get back to the comparative safety of Boston. Upon the retreat, they are pounded the entire way by the militia, and they lose over a third of their force that day in dead and wounded. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we have more armed conflict taking place up in Boston. A month later, this time it is not a misunderstanding on a country road. This involves massed musketry, advancing rows of infantry, booming cannon. The King's ships are firing on Charlestown and destroying it during the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British lose over 8,000 in dead and wounded. Ladies and gentlemen, when news of this military confrontation reaches the shores of England, the lesson becomes very plain to His Majesty King George III, and the King realizes that something serious has to be done with the American colonies. He understands it all too well. This whole notion of democracy, which at that time meant something close to anarchy, is becoming a dangerous infection in the colonies. It has to be stamped out. Samuel Adams is not interested in concessions. He is an all-out troublemaker, and there are more and more of his kind. The velvet glove is going to come off to reveal the iron hand. These colonials are going to be taught the error of their ways. Ladies and gentlemen, it was with that mindset that in August of 1775, King George III issues the Royal Proclamation of Rebellion, stating that the American colonies are in open and avowed rebellion to the crown. And from that point forward, the military was fully authorized to suppress the rebellion. Ladies and gentlemen, when news of this royal edict reached these shores, everybody in America trembled with fear because they now knew that the British meant business. Proof, hey, mightier than the sword, however, comes in January of 1776 with the publication of this pamphlet right here, Tom Paine's Common Sense. Tom Paine demolishes the words of King George III. This pamphlet was published right here in Philadelphia, just off of 3rd Street, and Paine makes many arguments for American independence. But his most powerful one is this. He says that liberty has become a fugitive on continental Europe. It is the role of America to provide asylum for that fugitive of liberty. Tom Paine's Common Sense, published right here in Philadelphia, January of 1776. Ladies and gentlemen, July the 1st of 1776, the last great Titanic showdown of the day takes place right here in this great room between the forces of independence, represented by John Adams of Massachusetts, versus the voice of submission to the crown, led by a Pennsylvania man, John Dickinson. John Dickinson stands up first to begin his emotional pleas. I am very unhappy, my friends. I am very unhappy that so many of you here are willing to vote for war against England. War between the colonies and our mother country doesn't make any sense. If this Congress votes for war against England, as our colleague John Adams says that we must, we are going to face a terrible disaster. England would bring in the might of our army and our navy from the east. She'll call upon her Indian allies in the west to ravage the frontier. We are going to be crushed, my friends, between two jaws. Goes on. Benjamin Franklin, my esteemed colleague from Pennsylvania, sits right here, and he speaks of an alliance with France. We have heard nothing from France. How can we possibly know what that treacherous pal has in mind? And finally, he concludes with this, ladies and gentlemen. Look at us, we can't agree on anything. How can we hope to prevail against the British? And even if we do, how can we hope to form a strong, united voice when we can't even agree amongst ourselves? He sits down, John Adams stands up from this chair right here to begin the rebuttal arguments. By this time, a great Philadelphia thunderstorm has rolled into the area. The skies have darkened. The candles are lit. John Adams has the look of a madman on his face as he begins to smash his fist down on this table right here, saying, he has seen the blood of his Massachusetts king. He was fully aware of the true intent of the British authorities. He said, do we dare submit ourselves to that idea of British liberty, or do we chart our own course as free United States? A trial vote is called for, ladies and gentlemen. South Carolina, no. Pennsylvania, no. Delaware, no. New York, no. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 colonies opting out. And with that number saying no, this whole idea of independence threatens going to backward forever. But that night, through a series of last-minute negotiations, the holdout colonies of South Carolina and Delaware are going to change their vote. Pennsylvania Assembly tells John Dickinson, stay home. You no longer are the voice of the colony. That clears the way for an assent from Benjamin Franklin. New York, however, they are steadfast. They're not going to vote for independence, but they're also not going to vote against it. Finally, on the very next day, July the 2nd of 1776, 12 of the 13 American colonies passed that resolution for independence, first proposed by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia on June the 7th. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our true Independence Day, and now the 4th. Now we celebrate the 4th because of this document here that this young lady is holding. Thank you so much. The Declaration of Independence is signed here in this room on August the 2nd of 1776, but it's accepted here on July the 4th of 1776 by John Hancock. They needed his official sanction, and then it went to print beyond that 2nd of Market Street, and the very first declaration, ladies and gentlemen, back to this young lady. The very first declaration took on this one. There were 200 broadsides that were printed up, and there are only 26 that still survive. You can see an original broadside right next door in our Great Essentials exhibit. But the handwritten copy, that was not signed until August the 2nd of 1776. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the War for American Independence is what? Obviously. But our young nation is facing many problems right from the get-go. There's near civil war. There's a hostile Great Britain on the sidelines playing the states off against each other. There's Shays' Rebellion in 1786. Finally, with this state of affairs no longer tolerable, with everybody knowing that the Articles of Confederation are a miserable failure, James Madison convinces George Washington to sit right here. To sit right here in this very chair. This is the original chair that George Washington once sat in to reside starting in May of 1787 over the Constitutional Convention. And then, over a period of 4.5 months, they throw out the Articles of Confederation and they usher in these wonderful words. We the people of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, these words are reminders that reach across the centuries to tell us this, that the true power of our republic will always be with the American people. But it is a power that has to be dispensed with prudence, with justice, with responsibility, and with equity for all Americans. This document, the Constitution of the United States, is signed in this room on September the 17th of 1787. Then it goes out to the states for ratification. And then finally, in the fall of 1789, the brand new government takes hold right here in Philadelphia. Now, this document did not come about easily. There was a great deal of argument. The Philadelphia newspapers described the Constitutional Convention at times as being a circus because despite the windows being closed, the door being closed, and through that intense heat of a Philadelphia summer, people outside could hear the men in here arguing bitterly. They were at each other's throats. Benjamin Franklin used to sit right here at the head of the room, next, right in front of George Washington. He was an elderly statesman. He was a figurehead. It was thought that his presence would help bring about a strong unity. Not really, because the men, they were arguing and arguing and arguing. Benjamin Franklin, at times, would look at the back of the president's chair. And on the back of this chair, ladies and gentlemen, is this beautiful wood carving. Here's a photograph of that wood carving. Franklin asked himself, is it a rising sun or is it a setting sun? Franklin doubted if any kind of agreement was going to be reached. Well, ladies and gentlemen, finally, with the signing of the Constitution, Franklin remarked, I now have the good fortune of knowing that that sun on the back of the president's chair is indeed a rising one and not a setting one. The great American experiment was underway. And ladies and gentlemen, it is still underway, and it will probably be underway for many, many centuries to come. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Franklin was put to the test once again at the conclusion of the convention. He was on his way home down the Market Street, Franklin Court, and a woman is walking along the sidewalk. She shouts out at him rather derisively, Dr. Franklin, what kind of government have you made give us up there at that State House? Franklin had had enough. He leans out his stand chair window, ladies and gentlemen, and he points a menacing finger at her and he says, "You live in the Republic, Madam, if you can keep it." Ladies and gentlemen, just to wrap, the men that you read about today, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, they came together here. And it was right here, in this right room, where their ideals transformed His Majesty's 13 colonies of British North America into the United States of America. Right here in this very room, so many years ago. And ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that this room is still a very special place. And I think that 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, our distant descendants are going to continue to come back to this very room to be reminded once again of those ideals that once led to the American Revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude this tour. It's my last tour of the day. I'm glad my voice is going out. I sincerely wish all of you an enjoyable remainder of your stay here in our fair city of Philadelphia. Take care, folks. Thank you.
Sorry.